You want to make a ballad album. I want to make a funk album. So we toss a coin. We're making a funk album.
Yeah.
I want to study funk. I've never studied funk. I've enjoyed, Earth, Wind and Fire and Steve, James Brown and Sly. So I said to you, Pat, let me go and get my head round what funk means to me. So on our way up to Lake and Monteith again, I sat and listened to funk. And I was more drawn towards the kind of New Orleans kind of funk rather than kind of up-tempo disco funk. And I put together a kind of playlist and I just analysed it and figured out what was going on. Lots of African guitar references everywhere, I noticed. I'd never thought about it before. But when you hear these fabulously rhythmically displaced guitar lines and you're trying to follow parts and they seem to be landing at different things. So I was kind of making mental notes and then I started writing pieces of music and grooves. After all this research, came back down the road, you and I started realising all these things that I kind of discovered, and we wrote Hotwire.
Yeah, you brought all this stuff down from your rural, secluded spot, and I didn't write lyrics for them originally. I just vocalised, and I tried to be in the spirit of the funk, as get into the mess. Funk means mess as much as anything else. So I then put lyrics to those vocalisations. So the lyrics came as the last point, and a lot of them were quite stream of consciousness. I don't know what a lot of that album was about, to be quite honest, lyrically, because it was kind of responding to the strong New Orleans element to it. I mean New Orleans in that sense of the two-step groove and the kind of. It's halfway between Latin and African, and it's the way it feels in any case. And it's a great record. It's one of our coolest records, I think.
You get what you're able to, you take what you need to.
So we released the album Hotwire and it gets quite a bit of attention. Jules Holland invited us on to his Radio 2 show to talk about it. As a music guy, he's a musicologist. He was genuinely interested in how we kind of dealt with funk. So we had a lovely day with Jules Holland at his studio.
There was also a great review of Hotwire by a guy called Andy Gill in The Independent, but this guy is the grumpiest music reviewer. I don't think he's given a positive music review to anything for years. They gave a very positive review to Hotwire, particularly picking up and I was quite happy with this because we were trying to figure out the running order of the album, and I said you must put those two New Orleans tracks, which would be Duty to the Debtor and Little Man, must open with these two tracks because they're going to set people up for the rest of the record. And he picked up on those two straight away. He says this is the most authentic New Orleans funk I've heard for many years. And then as these things go along, I don't know, luck begets luck or chances open up other chances. And one of the most glorious things that's ever happened to me live is when we got the call out from the Average White Band to come and not open for them, but to play with them.
Can I just say before we start, when I was a wee boy in 1979, I was watching STV and an advert for Feel No Fret came on. And I had to make a big decision when I was sitting there watching them with their cans in their heads. I said, punk or funk? They made the decision for me, but probably this song, Average White Band, come on.
I mean, the remaining hairs on my head are still sort of standing up at the thought of it. And then they played some of our stuff. They played a song that we wrote for Open Soul called Heading for a Fall, which completely stood up amongst their stuff. And then we also did a Stevie Wonder cover, We Haven't Done Nothing.
It was a funk in.
It was a funk in, but I mean, it was a meeting of hearts and minds. And you could, if you see some of the clips that still exist on social media, the excitement of the audience.
We got asked to play the Isle of Wight festival.
Indeed we did.
That festival's got all those amazing ornate posters.
Yes.
To me, festivals logistically are an absolute nightmare. Do you think about it, trying to get on site with a band and equipment and get it all set up, and you don't get a sound check, and you don't. It's just, from an artist's point of view, when you see these artists on festivals are going, "Come on, everybody, having a great time, having a great," just be rest assured the band's had a terrible time. Getting to the place and getting set up.
Yeah.
So the release is when you get on the stage. So it was a moment.
Yeah.
Hue and Cry at the Isle of Wight Festival.
The moment I wake up.
So in February, the month of love, 2011,
Notoriously.
we do another weekender at the ABC, and this time you title it the Glasgow Kiss Weekender.
And we know what the ambivalence of a Glasgow Kiss, do we not?
Maybe it was Doogie that named it. And we decided to do a night of love songs. Oh, there's some great recordings on this. We did It Must Be Love. We did Yesterday.
We did I Say a Little Prayer for You.
Oh, is that from that night?
Yeah.
That's one of our seminal performances
Yeah.
that night. But it was another successful weekender at the ABC, the Glasgow Kiss.
Live without you would only mean heartbreak for me.
So the beginning of 2013, my baby's born,
Sweet Eva.
which means I need to get my studio out of the house, because babies in studios don't work. So we were looking for a place. The studio we're in just now is a bespoke built studio in a building that had been refurbished. So this studio has been great for us, and the first thing we recorded in it, it was the anniversary of our second album, Remote, and Doogie had said, we should celebrate it in some way. And me being too creative as usual, I said, well, why don't we revisit the songs, but in a kind of different way? And you said to me, what do you mean a different way? I said, well, musically, every major chord has a relative minor chord, and vice versa. So why don't I flip all the chords? Oh! So you didn't really understand until I played it to you.
Yeah.
And you immediately got it. I thought, well, okay then, so if the mood's going to inverse on these songs, I'm going to revisit the lyric. So it kind of ballooned pretty quickly into quite a major project.
It was a major album, actually. But what it did was it revealed either the underside of the song or the next chapter of the story that came along. And my favourite track on that record is that we had a song from the old days from Remote in 1988 called The Only Thing More Powerful Than the Boss, which was sort of anticipating how computers would empower workers and organisations. And I got a chance to rewrite the lyric, and this time it was an AI drone about to land cruelly and terribly on some target of the US, and it was actually having this conversation with all this other AI drones about how it didn't really want to do this, and you got me to sing through a vocoder. As you say, creativity off the charts, Interesting, a lot of trauma around that record between you and I, because there was a kind of revival of that era where we were having a bit too many fights, so it kind of came up in the middle of us in our settled maturity, kind of like bzzz. So that's what it was like to be in making music in 1989 as two fractious brothers. So we wrestled that down and we actually got the record finished. And if you listen to it, it's actually one of our most stylish records, I think. Clever record. So 2014, good year for us musically, but a big year otherwise, because it was the date of the independence referendum. I had devoted about a third to a half of my life to it for about 2 years. I was on the board of the organisation Yes Scotland. It was leading the Yes campaign for independence. Dragged in a lot of my fellow artists and musicians that I'd made contact with over the last 20, 30 years. We went out there and we were as positive as we could be, and not enough people wanted it. The vote was 55 no to 45 yes. And it kind of knocked me sideways for quite a while. I think you had something of the same injury as I did.
Traumatised.
Yeah. There was lots of consequences of it. I mean, for other parties, the Greens and the SNP increased their membership, and people got thinking about politics again in a way that they hadn't before. A certain interest in Scottish progress has always been part of what we've doing. If you go back to the earlier episodes in this series, we have gigs that we're doing with the STUC and things, issues that we're raising. So this felt like the culmination of it, and we just didn't get over the line. And so I was very happy to be a musician, a working musician at that moment, because no matter what you think of the issue, it was emotionally demanding. A no vote for those who campaigned for yes. And so when you went out and toured, you just took your audience as it was. You didn't presume that they had any perspective or positions either way. And we all kind of came together in a gig. And I was very pleased for it, because it gave me experiences of epiphany and collective joy at a time when I thought the big dream of my life has fallen over. My political life has fallen over. Funny enough, we were musically very, very vibrant. I was very pleased to be a musician at that moment in time.
I just want an independent Scotland.
That's all I wanted, Gregory. Maybe, who knows, maybe we'll get it someday. But that was a gut punch.
You can stick your independence up your arse. This would have been Sinatra's 100th birthday, or 100th year, if he lived. There's what I'm hearing from all around Mediaville is everybody's going to celebrate this. We should be in that space. And we thought, okay then, a Sinatra tribute record is probably going to be a big moment for us, so we should maybe put some thought into it.
And the thought was that in these days of endless digital archive, you can pull up the classics, but you can also pull up stuff that nobody had really ever heard or considered in an artist for ages. And so we did a wee bit of a trawl around that. We also had some songs that were very, very personal to us in terms of our father and in terms of our background. And the Sinatra albums that have been playing in the house, repeat every weekend. Some of the best Sinatra recordings are of him with a couple of musicians, Red Norvo or whoever it is, just in some place in Paris or Chicago where he's just playing with an audience that you can almost hear every member of the audience, and that's some of the best Sinatra recordings. So we went to that era of Sinatra to be inspired. But an emotional record, I mean, a lot of ghosts and memories of the past coming through all of the songs.
Beautiful cover. I remember when I first saw the cover, that graphic designer that you work with. I loved that cover. Yeah.
The album that was in our house was Frank Sinatra Greatest Hits Volume 1. And if you look at that, you'll see a comparison with...
Was that where he's got the baseball jacket on and the white polo neck?
Yeah. A bit of a reference to that.
I love you.
If you remember back to the Hotwire coin toss, I had to honour...
You didn't have to, but you did.
Honour the bet. And you would kind of come around the studio and go, can we do our ballad album, Greg? You've done your funk album. And I says, right, okay, Pat, we'll do our ballad album. It was in this room, actually, that we wrote these songs.
Yeah.
And we set ourselves a task that we wouldn't leave this room until we had a verse, a chorus. We watched a lot of movies.
I remember that. It was a multimedia inspiration.
We went back to one of our first producers, Jimmy Biondolillo, would play movies.
That's right.
Before we would create horns or string parts. And just watch 15, 20 minutes of them. You and I adopted that again. And the brief was to write a ballads album. And God, we wrote some beautiful songs, brother, for Pocketful of Stones.
I was disappointed with how the album was received by the business. The comment that I remember that kind of perplexed me, and I thought, well, that's quite interesting, I have to take that on board, is that someone said it's quite musical theatre. And I thought, I wonder what they mean by that, as in they felt as if it was kind of theatrical and sort of mannered. And I thought, I wonder whether that's the downside of having a perfect situation, you know, where you have the money to pay for your record and you have the musicians on hand and you live in your own world in a way, you know. So it's made me sort of have a bit of a thought about how you meet where people are in the music business, but also you have to hold your nerve about your own taste.
But the brief of the album was it was a ballads album.
Well, and
most of the greatest ballads are from theatre or from musicals.
That's true. So we fulfilled our own brief. So it's a kind of a strange one. I think people will come back to Pocketful of Stones and see how brilliant it was. The cover of it was. We should tell the story about the cover of it.
Or The Devil's Pulpit. So The Devil's Pulpit is a Jurassic tourist attraction in Scotland. So if you drive up the east side of Loch Lomond, there's a little bridge just outside Balmaha that you stop at. And there's no parking, they don't encourage you to do this. And there's a descent of about 200 feet, maybe more, to get down to this thing. So we made our way down the 200 feet descent with makeup on and good clothes. And it's not like a hill like that, it's a drop.
It's a vertical.
You've got to hold on to stuff and all that stuff.
I thought it was the biggest mistake I'd ever made in my life.
You were gung-ho, so where are you going, Pat? I think you didn't think, oh, it'll be fine. It's like, I think
it was will be fine because I think it might not be fine.
Because I'd done it before, I'd know how treacherous it was. So we got down to the bottom and I showed the photographer and I showed you the Devil's Pulpit. But I remember during the photo session for it, we were standing there in our clobber.
Full designer gear.
And round the corner came these potholders with all their garb on.
What was so
and they were
fantastic
completely,
about it? What are you doing here?
How did you get here?
And they had potholed their way laboriously all the way to the Devil's Pulpit, and then these 80s ponces were standing in their Zara gear, just doing a photo session as you do. But it's a great record, and I think people will come back to it and they'll dig classics out of it in 20 years' time.
Let her go. Your work is through.